And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Our topic tonight is the economy. Last week we dealt with the general performance or non performance of the PPP since it took office a year ago. And today we want to pay attention to the economy primarily because without the economy, you are really not going to get a sense of the performance of any government because at the end of the day, it's about the material condition of people. Ultimately, that is what it is about. Politics arises from economics, um, infrastructure, all of those things that we talk about, education, all of those things have direct and indirect connection to the economy. So we're going to talk about the PPP's performance, or put another way, we're going to talk about the state of the economy in the last year, and so that we get a sense of where things were a year ago, where things are now, what has happened, what's the PPP's philosophy, economic philosophy, what is it that is driving the decisions that the PPP has been making. There are lots of talk about these cash grants. Somebody told me 2 days ago that this is a government now of little cash grants. We heard them say that they are going to give a cash grant to pensioners and so forth. So we're going to talk about those cash grants and whether those cash grants are able to bring any kind of meaningful relief to the people, especially the poor people, and what are going to be the economic consequences of these one-off cash grants. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking, of course, about sugar because it was a big issue under the coalition government. The PPP made heavy weather about it. And today we want to see where they are with sugar. They're talking about the Amelia Falls story again. They're talking about the gas to shore pipeline. So we're going to cover in the gamut. And as I said, always say, look, economics are important because ultimately it's about people's livelihood. It's about relief at that level, that micro level. So it depends a lot on the macro policies, because that's one of the things I want to talk about with my guests. Policies, not a little handout here, a little handout there. That is not policy. So we're going to be talking about the PPP's policies and their non-policies. My guest, of course, is someone who has been in the driver's seat and continues to pay keen attention to what's happening in the economy. Former Finance Minister Winston Jordan. Mr. Jordan, welcome to today's program.
Hi, David. Good evening to you and good evening to your viewers. Thanks for inviting me.
Let me get straight to the point. If you were to discuss the state of the economy in the last year, how would you do so in general terms?
Well, I will throw it to those who feel it most, and I would ask those whether they feel better off than they were, say, at December 2019, which is the last full year of the coalition government. And I think there will be a general view, if it were honest, to say no, that under the coalition they fared better than they are faring now. What is happening now is that uses of flooding and pandemic are being used for the high degree of mismanagement that you are seeing right now in the economy. And I can say flat out, if we didn't have oil as the savior right now, oil is what is saving this economy from tanking. If we didn't have oil, and given the non-performance in critical sectors over the years, we would have been savage. Being a non-tourist country, we would have been savage because our bauxite at that time wasn't selling. Rice, although was doing well, wasn't earning as much as it used to earn in Venezuela. Sugar, as you know, was the dead duck and just sucking the treasury. We would have been worse off if we didn't have oil. But even with oil and the massive investments that are coming to the country, mostly going to the oil sector, you still have, in the case of the non-oil sector, a massive contraction last year of 7%. And although there were optimistic projections this year of rebounding, I don't think that the growth set in the budget can be achieved. Again, they are going to blame it on flooding. Again, they are going to blame it on the prolonged pandemic. But I am saying to you, management is not how well you do in times of good and times of plenty. The test of management is how well you do when there are the kind of challenges that are facing the economy to date. And so far, this government has failed miserably over the last year. Yes, they have come up with some one-off measures and so on, but those are exactly what they are. One-off measures where the objectives are not clear and therefore the outcomes are not clear. And that is what you have at the moment in a nutshell.
That is what you have at the moment in a nutshell. Let me ask you this, because some people are saying, well, the coalition left government a year ago. And what do you expect? A lot of the problems we see today in the economy were started under the coalition. Let me ask you this. What has qualitatively changed as far as the macro economy is concerned over the last year or so?
Well, set the base. The base obviously is the coalition. What was being experienced under the coalition? And I will use another couple minutes to really go back over this, because I think sometimes the expectations of a victory in 2015 by the people were so great as to think that we, like Midas or whatever, could have wiped out the previous 23 years of mismanagement in the economy. And, you can't kill expectations. But as much as we try to temper those, if you ask the average person today, they will say, well, you weren't there and you didn't do this and you didn't do that and so forth. Well, you can't beat the average man. But let us see exactly where we are. The economy itself at 2015 had begun a downward, I won't call it spiral, but it had begun to decline. If we just use on statistics alone, in 2012, if memory serves me, the growth rate was 5.3%. In 2013, the growth rate had slipped marginally to 5%. But in 2014, the growth rate had declined, had slumped to 3.9%. And that is where we were at 2015 when we came in. The things that were hidden from the coalition, by now we know. The biggest one was the state of the sugar industry. The state of the sugar industry. And for just repeating sake, when we came in, we understood how bad it was in the sugar industry. The PPP had been able to plaster over the cracks that were appearing in the sugar industry. As you well know, the closure of estates did not start under the coalition government. Jagdeo, when he was there, he had closed estates. And there were a lot of noise also when he closed those estates. And if my memory serves me, I believe Comrade Ramjatan had to go to court for some of those sugar workers. So it's not a coalition thing, but they were able to paper over those cracks. And number of the supporters, being the PPP supporters and so on, I guess they were able to paper those cracks pretty effectively. But when we came in, it had become a gulf. It wasn't really cracks that they were papering over. we had seen what was there, a gulf of $90 billion in deficit that they had. $90 billion in deficit. That is as clear as it can get. The industry was starved of resources. It was starved of capital resources. It wasn't earning as much, and production and everything was plummeting. And we all know the story by now. The general manager the CEO had dropped it and went back to New Jersey where he lived. And it was left to this young coalition government to find that $12 billion to save that industry. You know, this is very, very important. I will repeat it from now till whenever, because people want to dismiss it. A young coalition government with a manifesto of its own, thinking that it had an industry that was reasonably well off, had to find an industry that was dead broke, and still was able to find $12 billion to save that industry. But in the process, it obviously could not implement some of its programs that it said that it were going to implement. But you would think that would have been a one-off event. It was not a one-off event. And throughout our life in government for that 5 years, our nemesis was the sugar industry, because they kept pouring more and more money in an industry that, yes, had been here and so forth, but an industry that was obviously dying. A lot of money was squandered in that industry, in the Skeldon estate and Enmore and so forth. And a lot of the money that was given to us by the European Union was also squandered. But all of this, the PPP appeared to have been able to give them a free pass over why squandering all those money. And it was left up to the coalition. So the point I want to make right off the bat is that rather than closing an industry when we came in, we tried to see how best we could repair it. But as you said, we're going to come back to that. I don't want to think it over. So at 2015, that was the state of the sector, of the sugar. Bauxite was in not the debt throes, but bauxite also had problems. Rice was doing well, principally because of the Venezuelan market. But when the Venezuelan market fell, the bottom fell out of the Venezuelan market, rice fell through the ground. You see, at any one time in the history of the economy of Guyana, one or two sectors could be deemed to have been the lead sectors, the sectors that drove growth in the country. Where it was bauxite at one time, sugar at one time when we had the fancy sugar prices in the European Union and so forth. Rice for small time, rice wasn't necessarily a major leader, but there were times when rice had good prices in Venezuela market, in the Trinidad market, and so forth. In the mining sector, particularly gold, it had its good prices, but in the period that the coalition was there, prices had slumped where gold was concerned, and so on. So, with the benefit of one or two lead sectors, growth tended to be in the region of 3.5% to 5%. And when we were coming back in 1991, 92, because of how the economy had slumped in those days, we had 6%, 7%, even I think 8.5%. But beyond that, growth tended to be in the region 3.5%, 4%, maximum around 5%, and so forth. So despite all of those problems, in 2015, we were able to grow the economy 3.1%. In 2016, we were able to grow the economy 3.4%. In 2017, when gold prices slumped and when rice had a very bad year, growth declined to 2.1%. But by 2018, growth had rebounded to 4.4%. And by time 2019, our last full year, for which we accounted for, growth had risen to 5.2%. So every year in our time for our 5 years, we had grown the economy. So that is an achievement. Every year, there was no year of negative growth. And we had grown this economy in the context of very low single-digit inflation
Mm-hmm.
Very low. I'm talking here about, as a matter of fact, at one time, 1 year, there was deflation, which means negative inflation, right? But our inflation hovered between 1.5, maybe around maximum 2, and so.
Yeah.
So,
So let me talk a little bit about inflation and its impact on the economy so that our leaders get a sense, our listeners get a sense of how important or not important that indicator is.
well, okay. Inflation is basically a composite index of prices of a basket of goods. Okay, that and its movements are tracked monthly, seasonally, half yearly, and so forth. It's a composite. Okay, so it will say if how much $100, for example, will buy today versus that same $100 buying say next year. So $100 may buy only $97 worth of today's money next year. So
Mm-hmm.
you got an inflation, and people, the average housewife understands what I'm saying. If her husband, well, I don't want to use husband. Let us just say household income for her is $6,000, and let us say she buys the exact same items every month, and she's able to spend that $6,000 on those items and satisfy the household. With inflation, the next month, that $6,000 will not be able to buy the identical basket of goods, whether in terms of quantities or in terms of the combination of goods that she's buying.
Mm-hmm.
And in the context of what we have in here with prices spiraling, not just rising, prices are spiraling. And where people are subsisting on 2019 incomes, because that's the last time a salary increase was given, and that salary increase was given by the coalition government, the amount that $1,000 or $6,000 can buy in today's prices may be just about half or just over half of the basket that you could have bought in 2019. So that gives you the depth of changes and the quality of life, right? The loss in quality of life as a result of loss in income. Loss in income don't only come from losing your job and therefore you lost income. Loss in income comes where you are getting the same income, but you are faced with rising prices.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and that results in a loss of income. Because for you to, if you were that good enough, for you to buy the same basket of 2019 basket of goods in 2021, you will have to save, which means you will have to go into your savings. You will have to go into your savings to meet today's prices. So that is as simple as I could put it
Mm-hmm.
for your audience. So it is important to control inflation. Last I heard, and this is one of the points I want to raise very early, it is extremely difficult to get statistics out of the government. Extremely difficult. I have been trying my level's best to get some information to do a critical analysis, but no information is forthcoming. In fact, what is sad is that the half-year report for 2021 is not out as yet. And everybody should know that when I was the Minister of Finance, I had made it a regular feature that the half-year report would be submitted to the Parliament before it goes into recess. The half-year report will be submitted to the Parliament before it goes in recess, usually around the 10th of August.
Mm-hmm.
So it went into recess, I believe, last week, Monday, but there's no half-year report. Now, I must admit that the law says they have up to 28th of August. But they have the 28th of August to produce the report, not to make it public. Because if you go by what the PPP used to do previous to 2015, that report will then be sent to the Parliament. It will not be released until after the Parliament comes out of recess, which is till October the 10th, by which time the half-year report is of no use to policymakers, and other people who would like to use it for their projections and so forth. And that is why I made a commitment to get that half-year report out first week of August, just before Parliament goes into recess. It gets into Parliament, and once it got into Parliament, it is made public, and people could. But what is happening here now, they are afraid to put the numbers out there because certain of the numbers I'm hearing aren't looking good. The revenue is not looking good, and I will come back to that also. In the first half of the year, I believe I heard is hovering somewhere between 6 and 8%. Inflation between December and June of this year, I understand, is hovering somewhere between 6 and 8%. Now that is what you have to do when you not getting the numbers. Somebody tell you, well, it could be around 6%. Somebody say, by the way, things look like somewhere between 8% and so on. So I put in that range. I don't know. I haven't seen the figures and so forth. But it's very clear that inflation will spike in the first half of this year. So even though it may be less if you do year on year means half year 2020 to half year 2021. And the reason for that is because in the half year of 2020, as you well know, was the period of the country temps of the election. Nothing really was happening. Okay, so that is why you'll have that tempering of that particular half year. But if you use December to June as the half year of 2021, I understand it could be somewhere in the region of between 6 and 8%, and that is extremely high for a composite index. And when you go to individual items in that index, the price increases will be substantially higher, particularly when you take food items, vegetables, and so forth. It will be extremely far higher than the 6% that we be looking at.
So you didn't mention oil as you were going through your tenure. So it means, therefore, that what has changed qualitatively since you left office and now is the coming of oil and gas.
Substantially coming on stream. But you will appreciate that to get to force oil in 2019 December, massive investments had to be made.
Yes.
And that also would have pulled up investments in the non-oil sector, like health, transportation, tourism perhaps, housing, vegetables, because there'll be more demand for these things and so on. So those investments would have also pulled up that sector. And it obviously helped to pull up the growth rate in 2019 that I told you about, of 5.2%.
Yes.
But also, of course, it is our management of the economy. Now they like to you hear the PPP and the acolytes love to say how we mismanage the economy and so on. But listen to this. I just want you to listen to this small paragraph of what was said by the International Monetary Fund, the executive directors, at their meeting of September the 17th, 2019, to consider the Guyana report. And this is one small paragraph that they said. The directors welcome Guyana's broad-based economic expansion in recent years, underpinned by prudent macroeconomic policies. Not Winston Jordan saying that. This is the executive directors of the International Monetary Fund, the institution where you have to get the seal of approval for other donors to come on board. And they were saying that. And they went on to say, directors emphasize that to ensure effective use of the oil windfall, policies should focus on reducing macroeconomic vulnerabilities, addressing structural weaknesses, boosting inclusive growth, and promoting intergenerational equity. These are the objectives that had informed our economic policy and economic management from day one. And that is why you could hear many of our supporters blaming us, for example, for not doing more for them. Broad-based growth sometimes implies that some sectors, because of their nature, because of who are in those sectors and so on, may exacerbate the wealth gap and the income gap. The policies of the government that you put in place to narrow that gap, recognizing that that exacerbation can take place. And it's the policy that we had put in place or moving to put in place that in some respects got us into trouble. And I want to just quickly show you what I'm talking about.
Yes.
When you look at what has been given away in the 2020 budget and the 2021 budget, and almost every time you hear this government gets up with its very lax, loose policy announcements, they're always geared towards the private sector because the government believes in trickle-down economics. Give it to the private sector. They're going to expand, and as a result of that expansion and income, it will trickle down to the masses. Well, we had over a year of trickle-down economics. And what you have seen so far is nothing that is trickling down, is a worsening of the situation. And I'm saying it is not all due to the pandemic nor flooding. It is the mismanagement in the economy. You cannot for once hear the government saying that I am putting in X policy, Y policy, Z policy. I am putting in A tax policy, B tax policy, C tax policy. And these are designed to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objectives, 7, 8, 9, 10 sub-objectives, so that we can hold the government to these things. All you're seeing is the government putting budget after budget that is weakening the tax base in favor of the private sector, and as a result, widening the wealth gap and the income gap.
That is a very important point because you preempted my question, which was going to be this, and I still want you to address it, is that we are now entering the oil economy, the phase of the oil economy. What are the 2, 3, 4 things that you, Winston Jordan, think from a policy perspective that should be pivotal, that should be primary, that should be priority as you go into the early stages of the oil economy? You quoted the IMF. I'm very interested in that quotation. What would you have done in this second full year of oil, as far as the economy is concerned? What would you have done differently from what you did before?
Well, the is because we're not operating in a normal economy, what we would have done will not hold sway right now. But if I were running the economy still in 2020 and 2021, my initial or immediate targets was to try to get us out of the pandemic in a shape that would allow the economy to build and then take off. But in that period of the pandemic, my first task would have been people, human resources. This is distinct and different from what this government is doing. This government seems to think it is more important to show bricks and mortar than to show human existence in this pandemic. The amount of money that is being spent on bricks and mortar right now, I am saying could be diverted to be spending on the survival of human beings. For if there are no human beings at the end of this pandemic, then all the bricks and mortar, roads and so on that you're putting in will be of no use because you'll have nobody to use them. And because of this, that is why you're having these one-off jerky announcements of a cash grant here, a because we care here, and so on. And these things, when you add it up, don't mean much to the household. My argument would have been that A, there are a number of people who have lost their jobs, both in the private and public sectors. B, a number of people, households who are facing higher prices, whether from pandemic or flooding, who have no other source of income. And so my initial task would have been to design a program of transfers for a initial 6-month period, and then depending on how we see the pandemic, a further 6-month period. So people will know, just like your initial argument for cash transfers, people will know that they, notwithstanding the fact that they don't have a job, they can expect a monthly check of whether it's $50,000 or $100,000 to help them tide them over until the pandemic is over. It's not a one-off $25,000 and then you can't know what is happening in February or what is happening in March, what is happening in April, what is happening in May, and so on. A one-off $25,000 could not cut it. And that is why you ask where the money will come from. The money will come from the savings. If you stop doing all these infrastructural projects right now, I'm not saying these projects are not important. What I'm saying in the context of this pandemic, your first priority should be to people and not these projects. So the monies that you will save from doing these projects in this pandemic will go to people on a sustained basis. Also, this can be supplemented by withdrawals from the Natural Resource Fund, which the coalition through President Granger was good enough to establish, and we can see it growing. So we can be using monies from there, and this will negate us borrowing in the manner which we will also come to borrowing in the manner that this government has been doing over the last year. So that is one of the first things we will do. When we come out of the pandemic, we had in play a 10-year development strategy, a 20-year development strategy, the first 10-year being the decade of development. And that is where we were going to be pushing to implement. It was a strategy that was based on infrastructural renewal, energy renewal, education reform, health development, social and cultural development, sports, and so forth. And that, year by year, we were going to be implementing using a combination of oil revenues, regular revenues, because we were able to expand the revenue base substantially, regular revenues, and limited borrowing, because we were going to start reducing the rate at which we were borrowing. And in fact, down the road, thinking about repaying rapidly some of the more expensive debt.
Yeah, and I'm glad for that answer, because I think the PPP is going to say, but we are doing the same thing. So what I want to hear from you is, how are they doing it differently from how you think it should be done?
Well, what I'm saying, the focus is on bricks and mortar.
Mortar, right.
900 million US dollars, gas to shore. $1 billion, Amalia Falls. 300 million plus, the bridge across the Demerara River. Look, I am saying to you, these projects, with the exception of Amalia Falls, are projects we also contemplated.
Yes.
And in this regular scheme of things, without the pandemic, we would have been moving to implement them. But what I'm saying is a pandemic we have.
Yes.
And what we will be doing right now is slowing those down, pushing those back, pushing their startup back, while we use revenues saved on people on the survival of people. Because right now, people aren't surviving.
Right.
The hurtful part, people aren't surviving. You have large masses of people who are no longer eking out existence because they have no income. They have no income. What they're being given is a 25,000 one-off COVID grant. For the last year, how have they survived? And they're being given that in the context of spiraling prices.
Prices, yes.
You understand?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
as I said to you, our focus, immediate focus, would have been on people, sustaining incomes in the crisis.
For the benefit of our audiences, our audience, let me let you make that clear. If you were going to be focusing on people, clearly, cash grants would have been one of the things you would consider. Are you saying that you would have given higher cash grants
Yes.
or more focus? Tell us what you would have done.
Yes. I am saying, first of all, I would have worked out a cash grant that would have been sustained for 6 months. And then as we recognize where the pandemic is going and so on, maybe another 6 months or another 3 months, or the case may be. In other words, then, I'm saying there would have been predictable incomes going into households, especially households where people had lost their jobs, whether by the arrogant terminations of over 2,000 plus people that the government got in, whether it's another 2,000 that lost their job as a result of Caliber not being able to retain contracts, security contracts, whether it had been the private sector where a number of workers lost their jobs, and so forth. So those people, even though they lost their jobs, and recognizing that they have mouths to feed and household other expenses to pay, would have been targeted for a sustained cash grant, not a one-off cash grant. A
sustained cash grant.
Cash grant. 6 months in the first instance, and
then a review.
So depending on how long we expected the pandemic to last, and with a rise in vaccination, and with rigid enforcement of distancing and washing hands and all these kinds of things, we could have targeted sometime where things would return not to normal, but where we could gradually open back the economy, people got back jobs and so on, and we could then pull back on the cash grants in the manner in which we were implementing, and move towards trying to get on board the projects that we wanted to bring on board. That's the difference.
Let me ask you a further question on cash grant. What criteria you would have used to arrive at the size of the cash grant?
Well, in this case, I would have just used a flat cash grant, because the time to do the work, the analytical work, who lost the work or how much they used to get, and all these kinds of things would not have been there. And those things, as you know, because we don't have the technological makeup, we are cash economy and so on, you can't go and pull that information. So I would have done a Biden or yes, a Biden or even a Trump.
Right.
So you send out a check, an $1,800 check to everybody, right, in this particular period here, and you spend.
Yeah. But what would have been important, and I want to stress this for our viewers, is that it would have been sustained. It would have been, in the first instance, for 6 months, and a review after 6 months. And although you're not there, as I've been telling audiences when I get a chance to speak to them, position does not mean that we just oppose the government, but we should recommend things. And it's up to them whether they want, but we should put things to our people. And here is Mr. Jordan saying that the best way to deal with this cash grant, first of all, is to have it sustained. That is over a period of time, and then you review it. And I think that is one of the things as we are beginning to protest the overreach of this government and the mismanagement of the economy. think that is one of the things that we should make a demand for. And if our electoral representatives, our parliamentary representatives are listening, I hope that you take this on board, because it's a concrete proposal. Because the cash grant people are all over the place on it, understandably so. But if we are saying that this government is mismanagement, it's not doing it right, we ought to be able to say, as Jordan has said here tonight, very clearly how it should be done. So I think this is a very important piece of information that we've got there on how to deal with the cash grant. So those of you in the audience, those of you who are community leaders, that is the kind of thing I want us to you to spread among our people, so we have a clear sense of what we want now. What we want now. I'm gonna take a short break now, play a couple of PSAs, and then when I come back, I'm gonna talk to Mr. Jordan about trilogy. Because the shore, the harbor bridge, and what's the third one? Amelia Falls. So we're going to get a sense of what those things mean beyond names. So we take a short break and we'll come back and talk about those.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
And welcome back to Politics 101. We're talking money tonight. We're talking policies. We're talking economics. We're talking about the lifeblood of any society, and that is the economy. Talk about the economy. You can contribute to the economy of this show by your small donations. I want to thank those who have been so kind to send us some small donations, and I tell you, they've been helping us keep this program not only on this platform, on the broadcast platform. So thank you so much for your donations. And for those of you who have not done so, please go to the Cash App or whatever there is there and make your small donations. It doesn't have to be any big donation, just a small donation, so we can keep this thing going. We had this weekend protest in New York and Buxton, and I want to thank those of you who turned out to the Buxton protest. It was quite uplifting and inspiring, and we'll continue to work that East Coast corridor and then move further afield as the weeks go on. So keep the spirits up. They're taking notice of what you are doing, and that's what you want, to get the attention of those who hold power. And so some people have been complaining that they need to see more people out. Take the time. Take the time. A movement is not built in a day. What they say? They say Job didn't build the ark. Noah didn't build the ark in a day. Take your time. All right? The movement will take time. The more the movement grows, the more people are going to be part of it. So I just want to thank those of you who turned out. And of course, in New York, the protests seem to have had immediate effect. immediate effect, in the sense that the government was thrown on the back foot as far as its management of the society is concerned. Then they start to cry. Last year, when they were turning out all the Congress people and the OAS and the Commonwealth and all their people to say that they win the election, they weren't crying. No! International forces are beginning to say that they are oppressing their own people. They are not sharing the resources of this country equally. They're beginning to cry, oh, Hakeem Jeffries, how could he do that? Come, Hakeem, talk to us. Hakeem has nothing to talk to them about. He has spoken publicly and he has gotten the support of the Guyanese diaspora, and they better shape up. Because if they understood politics, they would know your turn to come. You know, as we mouth so long, wait, your turn to come. And it's just 1 year, and they're beginning to feel the pinch of international pressure on them. And that's how politics operate. So they're outside, and those of you in Guyana, you need to keep the pressure up. And as I said over this weekend, I know that a lot of people are passionate about vaccine, but vaccine is not our only issue. Do not allow this vaccine debate to divide the base. Do not allow the vaccine to get you to take your eyes off the other prizes. This thing has to be, as Mr. Jordan talked about the economics, a basket of issues, of which the vaccine is only one. So I want to appeal to you all, do not make your protest, your overall protest, just about vaccine. Vaccine is one of the issues, right? And it's about their mismanagement of the COVID-19, right? Know that for sure. And that is what unites all those different opinions on the vaccine. But we got the economy, we got racism, we got people losing their jobs. Those things are equally important. So again, big up yourself, big up what's happened this weekend, and we're going to continue to raise our voices, because in times like these, that is our greatest asset. Now back to Mr. Jordan.
Go on. I just want to stay a little bit on the grant, on the grant. All right.
Yes, go ahead.
And I want to make reference to the announcement by Ali yesterday of this one-off grant going to pensioners and so on. Okay. Now he used a number of 65,000 old age pensioners. Now that's a rather suspicious number. It has always been questioned, but the point I want to raise here is that there are a number of pensioners. Some of them might be old age pensioners, because old age pensioners are 65 years and older. But there are a number of pensioners who are below 65 years, because retirement at 55, who are not even getting the size of the old age pension. Because public service pension, minimum pension is half the minimum wage. The minimum wage is $70,000. Therefore, they will be getting $35,000. But because this one-off cash grant is only targeted to old age pensioners, there's a wide swath of pensioners who will not benefit from this $25,000. Whether they be NIS pensioners or public service pensioners and so on, there are a large number of them who will not benefit. And I'm also including even people who were high officials back in the 70s and the 80s. Devaluation wiped out their pensions. And so now many of them are only getting half the minimum wage. So this $25,000 is not targeted to them. It's only targeted to old age pensioners. So I think as partial as this is, I believe the government needs to review that and recognize that there are a number of pensioners there who are not even getting the equivalent of an old age pension. Secondly, I'm not honest. I don't understand how they are going to get to disabled people. I don't know if disabled people are only those who are registered with the National Disabilities Commission or whatever the case may be. And I don't know how many are those. There are a number of disabled people around who are not registered with the Disability Commission, and I don't know how they are going to get this $25,000 or how they are even going to be identified to get this $25,000. You know, there are a number of people who are not in receipt of social assistance, but who are in need of social assistance, but who will be denied this $25,000 because they're not in receipt of social assistance. So this is the discriminatory aspect of this, and it comes from the haphazard, ill thought out, ill defined way in which some of these things are doing. In fact, I believe you're quite right. This yesterday's announcement was a reaction to what took place on Sunday. It was a reaction to what took place on Sunday in New York. And because it wasn't thought out, it wasn't, and so on, it's ill-defined, and it's leaving out a lot of people. As ill-defined as it is leaving out a lot of people. So I think that is an area where I know they're listening, they will have to consider. The second part I want to raise is the pawning of our future. The pawning of our future. Look, let me tell you, go back again, these numbers. In the 5 years of the coalition's existence, when you look at the budget deficits that we carried for the 5 years, cumulatively, they add up to $94 billion. $94 billion. Okay? Developing countries can be expected to carry a deficit that is sustainable within limits and all this kind of thing. That's what we did. The two budgets that this government has brought out, two budgets, have a combined deficit in excess of $240 billion. $240 billion. And the reason why it has that deficit is because of the degrading of the revenue base on the one hand, which means that they have slashed revenues in favor of the private sector on the one hand, and of course, the massive increase in expenditure on the other. And therefore, to finance that, they then had to go and do borrowing. Every time you hear somebody, whether it's Ali or Jagdio or Ashley Singh, announce that they are giving away another $4.8 billion, don't jump up. There's no free lunch. They have to find that $4.8 billion. Since they don't have the revenues, they then will have to borrow it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where our natural resource fund comes in. They do not want to activate the natural resource fund, making all kinds of excuses. Let me tell you again what those executive directors of the IMF have said about our natural resource fund that we put in. Directors welcome the authority's natural resource fund legislation for managing Guyana's oil wealth and emphasize the need to complement it with a fiscal responsibility framework to avoid fiscal deficits. They commended that the NRF's framework aims to save some of the resource income for future generations and contain the pickups in public spending. This is the NRF that has been criticized by the opposition when they were in opposition and refusing to operationalize this NRF. But borrowing against the NRF in this March scramble and giveaway that is taking place. So yes, I say to people, take everything that's coming to you, but be vigilant, because what is happening right now is that they are pawning your future and they are utilizing the resources in the natural resource fund, even as they refuse to operationalize that fund.
Mm-hmm. So when they were able to draw down the fund from that fund, they already borrowed on it. So
they already have borrowed significantly on it. And as I said, if the two deficits for the two budgets is over $240 billion. That's over $1 billion US dollars.
Yeah.
The fund only has 400 million US.
So they already borrowed 2 times what's in the fund.
2.5 times the fund amount.
Yeah. Very important information.
People have to be very, even as they jump now and collect the 25,000 one off and so on, don't let them, first of all, they're not the ones who are really benefiting. It's the private sector who are getting these massive giveaways in terms of tax concessions and so forth, while you are getting crumbs. And in some cases, not even in the cases of the teachers and the nurses and the public servants and so on, not even crumbs they are getting. They are made to live on a 2019 salary, facing the brunt of the price increases and so on, while private sector people are given massive concessions and asking for even more concessions. Asking for more concessions and putting pressure on the government for even more concessions than what they have been given in the last 2 budgets and outside of the last 2 budgets.
Outside. Talk about the outside of the last 2 budgets.
Well, you had only last week, I think it was, they were given how many billion US dollars as a result of a write-down of freight charges. Yes, they are going to use. They're not going to include the insurance and freight in the calculation of the duties.
Mm-hmm.
I think they said that that's I think 4.8 billion or something like that. $4.8 billion in savings they claim.
Yeah.
To households. I don't know how it's to households. It's to the private sector. The private sector is under no obligation to reduce any price. There's no law in this country. There are no price controls. There's no law in this country. The private sector going to tell you is that, listen, I am facing high prices in other areas, and therefore I'm using that saving for those other areas rather than, and what is the incentive anyway for them to reduce the price when supply already is a bottleneck?
It's a bottleneck, yeah.
What kind of economics is it that you're asking private sector people to sell for less when supply is at a bottleneck? Sell cabbage for less than for less than the price right now when you can't even supply cabbage, or boro, or carrots, or potato, or building material. I don't know what.
So you are not optimistic that that is going to translate into any direct relief vis-a-vis prices out there?
David, I have nothing to go on, because look at the massive concessions that were given in the 2020 budget. Look at the massive concessions that were given in the 2021 budget. And look where prices are today. Look where prices are today relative to 2019. Or relative to even 2020 before the government came into power. So how have those concessions helped? They have not. Indeed, as I said on this program, on previous programs before, the only time that you can guarantee that a concession will be passed on to the consumer is in the petroleum sector, where, because you have Guyal, when Guyal reduces the prices as a result of a concession, a price concession, or a reduction in acquisition costs and so on, the other companies are forced to, otherwise they will lose market share. So
there's still a role for state entities in economies like ours.
There is a role for entities. There is a role for state entities, providing these entities operate in a BBC type manner or a Guyal type manner, right? Well, they have a role to play. And quite frankly, while we are at it, it may sound anathema to what they are doing, but if they really want to make a difference in terms of where these prices are going, then the state itself will have to look at means of acquiring stuff and selling it through state agencies, or entering into contracts with suppliers that in return for the concession that I give you, you will sell the good at this price.
Mm.
But right now, there are no contracts. There are no contracts. There's nothing to police.
And how you do that? Do you go to Parliament and make it a statute or what? What?
No. What I'm saying to you, for example, 2 weeks ago or last week, you tell them, listen, instead of this cost, insurance, and freight on which we normally value goods for duties and so on, we'll only do it at cost.
Right.
Okay. And I will now sign a contract with you saying this saving of $2 million or $3 million, I am giving you on the understanding that this thing, instead of pricing it at $4, you will price it now at $3.50, because the saving now is included to make you a $3.50. You will not appropriate the 50-cent saving and continue to sell it at $4. And if I see you breaking or breaching this contract, then we will resort to collecting on the original basis.
Good. So you all hear the story. It is possible to ensure that these business people get the money, but that it is passed down to you via contract. And you have a clause in the contract, as Mr. Jordan is saying, failure to go along with the agreements in the contract could lead to so and so and so and so. Right? So it's possible the PPP is not doing that. So in a sense, what they're doing, Mr. Jordan, is transferring well to their friends.
That is correct. Correct. They don't seem to appear to be serious. They don't appear to be serious in having their so-called trickle-down economics work. They're seeming to leave it to private behavior. And private behavior is about maximizing profit. It's not about social welfare. It's about maximizing profit. And I cannot stand by and enumerate, as Ali did yesterday, in what is now increasingly becoming a fad called state of the nation broadcast, to announce that you're going to reduce some gasoline price or something. You're going with a state of the nation broadcast now. But anyway, but it is not good enough to enumerate how many concessions you have given when you cannot point to how it has positively affected the Guyanese consumer. He went to a long list of what the government did since it came in 2020. And yet he has ringing in his ears these spiraling price increases and so forth. So what you are doing is not working. But yet you are there standing up again, continuing to do the same thing. And I know that that's the definition for madness.
Yeah. The definition for madness. Winston, this the Amelia Falls thing is back. It's back. Talk to us about that thing. I thought it was dead. I thought they brought it back. Why they brought it back? And what impact is that going to have, negatively or positively, on the economy?
Well, first of all, as it's a Daglio legacy project, and I think he will go down dying with it. He was very mad when it was put in the back burner or mothballed or whatever. When in the 2014 period Ramatar, and it certainly died a natural death when we came in, because all the indications are that is going to be an albatross 5 times worse than what Skeldon is. And Stabrook News, of all people, had a very interesting editorial.
Yes.
Speak or so forth, given all the pros and cons. The only pro that project has is that it's a renewable energy. That's all. But there are so many cons in terms of the engineering, in terms of the river flow, in terms of the costs, all these different negatives, in terms of the energy that is going to be supposedly going to be generated, the distance from where it's generated to where it's going to be distributed. When you put all of those in the mix, this is not a project anybody would want to go for. And I will make bold to say, they have put out ads for people who are interested in doing boot or butt. Boot is build, own, operate, transfer. Boot or but build, operate, transfer after a certain period. They're looking to see if anybody will bite. But I can almost say right now, the only way you will see somebody biting on that is if they are given generous incentives. Generous incentives. But the average person would not go anywhere near that project. Would not be near that project. I am given to understand that because it's one of Jagdio's so-called legacy projects, that they're prepared to even borrow to finance it if they don't get any takers. They're prepared to even borrow. No. He has gotten away with the Skeldon. I say gotten away because had that project been undertaken by the coalition government, you would not have heard the last of it. But I say gotten away because every time you raise the issue of the price that the average citizen is paying for the monstrosity called Skeldon, it quickly disappears from the press. It quickly disappears from the press. So too are many of the other projects, whether it's the fiber optic cable, whether it's the bridge across the Borbish River, whether it's the Marriott Hotel. All of these projects just seem to be stripped under the carpet. And so you're now talking about Amalia Falls, a dead project, and a gas to shore project, which we ourselves were contemplating, but never came up with wheels because that was never even considered in the field of things in terms of the most efficient site to bring the gas.
We've lost you there.
As to why
Good.
it doesn't make sense to bring the gas to shore in a busy river.
We've lost your video there. Sorry, your audio. Still no audio. We've lost the audio there with Mr. Jordan as he was speaking about the gas to shore pipeline. The audio is not back on. We're not hearing you. We seem to have lost the audio there, Mr. Operator. Tell you what, we're going to take a short break. Do our PSAs, and when we come back, hopefully the audio will be fixed with Mr. Jordan.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
And welcome back to Politics 101. Tonight we're talking about the economy, and we have had quite a program thus far. Mr. Winston Jordan, former finance minister, is here with us. A whole lot of information and analysis, which I think are extremely important as we navigate what's happening. I always say, as a protest person, that you must always protest with things in your hands and your head. You must know what you want. You must make demands. Because of course, you want the government to go, but until the government goes, you want the government to do what is right. We were in Boxer on Sunday. We said we see them digging up the road there to get it repaired. They weren't doing it all the time. Until we start to protest, they start to repair the road. Good. You claim victory for it. You came there to Buxton a couple of weeks ago. You came back again, and now they're doing the road in Buxton. You made them do it. So we must know what we want when we are protesting. We saw them, they went there the day before on Saturday, and they share out football and all those other things and so on. That is good for the young people who are into sports. I don't mind them doing some things once our people are very clear that they're not doing you a favor. That's one. Two, that handouts are not policies. We must demand policies. We must demand policies. So if you don't struggle, you don't win anything. If you don't nurture the plants in the garden, they're not going to grow and they're not going to bear, whether it's fruits or vegetables. You have got to make demands. So don't feel that what you're doing, it's not yielding results. The people at Linden were able to get them to say, okay, we're not going to implement this thing in 2 weeks. They're hoping to play for time in 2 weeks and hope that you forget. But when you smell victory and you like the smell of it, demand more. That is the objective of these protests. So do not believe we are not making progress. We are making progress. They're talking about us all the time. I understand Mr. Jagdio, he was talking to a critic or somebody, and he was mad because I tell people to undermine his government. You know, Ravi Dev, over the other side, my friend, he said, I'm asking people to, what you quote from me? Aggressively militant. No, I don't mind. Right? I said, I'm not calling for violence. I don't have the capacity. You, the people, don't have the capacity to violence. The capacity to violence lies with the state. What we are doing is protecting ourselves against economic violence, against physical violence, against political violence, and preempting violence to come by arguing for a violence-free political architecture. Mr. Jordan, are you back with us? The video, the audio is still not coming through. We still have some problems, Mr. Jordan's audio. We still have some problems with Mr. Jordan's audio. But tonight's program, I think, was very eye-opening. I think it has made clear on the cash grants that what we're demanding. I want us to adopt the Jordan doctrine. We are demanding that cash grants should be for, in the first instance, 6 months. This one-off thing can't work. And it must be reviewed after 6 months. It must be structured. When Professor Thomas proposed the cash transfers in Boston in 2018, he made very clear that this was a policy initiative that is aimed at putting money in the people's hands so that they are going to put it in the economy. One thing you're sure about poor people, that when you give them money, they're going to spend it. They're going to spend it. They're going to buy food. They're going to buy educational things. They're going to buy clothes. They're going to repair their houses. They're going to pay for childcare. you're sure that that money is going back in the economy. Because Jordan explained just now, when you give that money to big businesses, unless you sign a clear contract with them, you are not sure that that money is going to go back into the economy. And so that is the difference between trickle-down economy and bottom-up approach to economics. I don't think Jordan or certainly myself that we are against giving money to businesses, especially small businesses, to help them to cushion what is going on. But these money are going to big businesses. They're not going to medium-sized businesses or small businesses. And so therefore, we have to demand these things. Mr. Jordan, is your audio fit?
I hope so. Hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Yes. So I was holding the phone there while you were taking care of that. And when we got cut off, you were talking about the gas to shore pipeline.
Yes, yes. So I was saying that this matter has been dealt with extensively. When the studies were done by the coalition, the site that was appeared to be most favorable was on the East Coast, somewhere on the East Coast, and both in terms of costs and expansion and so on. The Wales site was never contemplated, and that in any case, as has been shown, to try to string a cable along a busy river like the Demerara River, especially where it has already shown interruptions with GPL's cable that has been strung across the Demerara River at I think it's Freedom Hoop or wherever it is stationed. The many disruptions to that cable that has taken place, and even to GT&T's cable that has taken place that has been embedded in the Demerara River. It shows how the folly of trying to put a similar cable in such a busily traversed and fast-flowing river. So, we had considered gas to shore, and we were going to do that project, but B, certainly not in the place where it's being intended now. And unfortunately, we may be looking for serious problems where that is concerned, both from the standpoint of environment, costs, and otherwise.
There you go. What's happening with sugar, Winston? What's happening? What's happening with it?
They keep pouring more and more monies into sugar, and we keep getting the same old excuses every time production decline. Production, they're not going to achieve their target again. And these are very minimal targets that are being set for them. The latest estimate is that they're not going to achieve the target. They're now blaming it on flooding, so to speak. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw the CEO talking up. They made some cash receipts as a result of selling, I think, bagged sugar or so on. But that industry has little hope of coming back, but high hopes of draining the little windfall that we are getting in the oil sector. And it is unfortunate that this is happening, and it's happening at the time when quite a few people in the society are remaining quiet, knowing fully well what is happening.
And the bridge across the Demerara River, where that is at the moment?
Again, they are building a bridge across the Demerara at a site that was not contemplated, a site that has not been being the subject of feasibility studies, and they have invited tenders knowing fully well that they don't even understand the nature of the river, so that the foundation itself, they don't understand the bridge foundation, but they've gone out tendering for bridge. And this is the same folly that we see that took place with the Chedijagan International Airport, where they just collected money, start building a project that had no feasibility study, no other studies that they normally will do, including soil tests and so on. And they started pouring sand like they're heading good at one end of the airport, only to realize when it was too late that the Soksan, as we call it, Soksan, and by that time they had disbursed over 50% of the money in sand.
Mm.
And that is why you have all the problems that are going on right now with that airport. They have to abandon that side now and go to the other side.
Wow.
So they just collected money because the Chinese vice president was coming through the area, collected money, started building an airport that had no feasibility study, and so on. And we are now paying the price. There are huge overruns on that airport right now. And as I said, we are paying the price. And we will pay the price for the bridge, as we are going to pay the price for that gas to shore project. There are a number of other questions on that gas to shore, including the fact that gas is only guaranteed, they said, for about, I think it's 10 or 14 years or something like that. What are you going to do with all the infrastructure that you put down?
Yeah.
And who will decommission the infrastructure in the ocean, so to speak? Other people were suggesting that you could have used floating ships to store the gas and pipe it to thing, and when the gas is finished or the gas run out, the ship just sail away. But here now you're building permanent infrastructure for a resource that is not going to last 100 years. It's only going to last 10 at most, 15 years. And for that kind of money, people are suggesting there are huge alternatives that could be gotten, that can be put in place instead of this particular project in the way how it is being undertaken.
Let me ask you this, Winston. There's been a lot of talk about local content and so forth. I understand that lots of Trinidadian businessmen and women from other parts of the Caribbean, they're here. They're crawling in Guyana. Talk to us about that, and how does that line up with all this talk about local content?
Well, David, is a fantastic question. I'll tell you this this much. What you seem to have in Guyana is a people who want to talk a lot and maybe get their views and so on in the papers and so. And we recognize this. That is why after 6 years after oil has been discovered in Guyana, the only piece of legislation, oil legislation, that you have in place is the Natural Resource Fund. That is the only piece of legislation that you have. And for that, we put out a green paper. We had extensive consultation, but after a while, we said enough is enough. You cannot consult until the cows come home.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put a stop. What they are seeking to do is think that they can get the best ever local content legislation by plucking pieces from all over the world. The last time that happened, we ended up with the Guyana Constitution. We ended up with the Guyana Constitution, and we see what it is today.
Yeah.
So they're still struggling to put a local content legislation together 6 years after. Meanwhile, the Trinidadians, the Nigerians, the Barbadians, the Surinamis, these people aren't waiting. They aren't waiting. You will be amazed the number of Trinidad firms you have in Guyana and what even they are in. Property management, hotel, taxi, all of these different things the Trinidadians are in Guyana. While we're waiting for local content policy. While the very private sector don't even seem to understand. Put something in place. And as you go along and as you learn, you can amend it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But no, you're struggling to see if you can get the best local content legislation in the entire world. Listen, we could also get the best local content legislation. The proof of the pudding is always in the eating. It's in the eating, the implementation. And that is where we have fallen down through the years. We got thousands of laws on the books. But implementation has been our book. Look, take the simple pandemic. Perhaps the pandemic is continued to raise because of the uneven enforcement of the very stringent measures that they have put out. You closing down some little shop, which is right, but you got another casino open till 4 o'clock in the morning. Or your favorite watering hole opens till 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. You got shooting going on and all kind of story. It's the unevenness in which the enforcement taking place. And had we stringently enforced those very measures, today, combined with the vaccination, we would have been in a far better place.
Yeah.
better place than we are in today. So I could tell the private sector and all them who continue with this foolishness about every day trying to consult to get the best deal and picking up something from here and picking up something from there and so on, is to get the thing in place so that you could start enforcing something. 3/4 of a loaf is better than a whole bread.
There you go.
If you can't get it, but don't tell that to the private sector. Don't tell the private sector, certainly not this private sector that we have in place. And that is why I'm saying it takes strong management. Strong management. Yes, you can go about doing your consultations and so on, but there comes a time when we have to bring it home. Bring it home. Every time you put a piece of legislation there, somebody's going to come up with something and say you missed this or you missed that and tar and narrow. And every time you hold back, it's a free ride for all the free riders who are coming here. There's no legislation in place, or there's some archaic piece of legislation in place that you can't deal with. Take the Petroleum Commission. The man runs and he amends a piece of the old 2016 legislation, Petroleum Act, to deal with whales, to deal with and some fiber optic cable that Exxon wants to run. When GT&T and E-Networks and them wanted to run fiber optic cable, we didn't change any law, but they run to amend the petroleum legislation to give legal thing for Exxon to run a fiber optic cable and for the whales to privatize lands, private lands that might be in the way of the whales. Those are the two things this government has done in a whole year after speaking about what the coalition government didn't do. Two pieces of legislation the coalition government were able to put into Parliament: the Natural Resource Fund and the Petroleum Commission Bill. They made a lot of noise about the Petroleum Commission Bill, a bill that was modeled after most of the semi-autonomous agencies that we have in this country, but for which they said, no, too much power going into the hand of the minister and so on. And they said, let it go to select committee. That bill was put in there in 2016. It died after Parliament closed down in February, in 2019, December. All that were there and were not concluded died. So the petroleum, none of them have a Petroleum Commission bill. A bill was presented to the National Assembly in 2016. But it was then forced, after its first reading, it was forced into the select committee. And imagine, by 2019, when the Parliament shut down, it did not come out of the select committee.
3 years.
Or that in the select committee. Well, I wasn't about for that to happen to the Natural Resource Fund. We were adamant that we had to have a legislation in place to make certain those revenues were not spent in a capricious manner. And that is the only thing going for Guyana right now when it comes to legislation. All the rest is the government legislative agenda comprises a funny bag. When you look at the legislative agenda that is in Parliament over the last year, what did you have? The bulk of the bills were financial bills, whether it's budget or supplementary appropriation or contingency fund or something, or tax bill, tax amendment bill, and so on, to give away these concessions. Then over the last couple of months, you see some interesting bills come up. One to adopt children. One to give a non-legal spouse powers to inherit, assets. You understand? And the other one, of course, is the one that I find to be very, very interesting, but for which I don't see enough noise being made, is to give birth certificates.
Certificates.
Right? To anybody who, a prominent person, says, yeah, I know the person. Which is a dangerous thing, very dangerous, and of course, which is designed to close any future gap that the 2020 election had thrown up. knowing fully well you may not be able to rig the election the way that it was rigged in 2020. Now you have the numbers by you. So now everybody and their friend now can say, yes, I know Tom Dick. Tom Dick Barn right in this house says, so give you a birth certificate. In this time, when fakes are easy, easy, counterfeit, people counterfeiting money and you don't even know, counterfeiting passport, much less this stupid piece of paper they call vaccination card. And now you're talking about birth certificate. So that is the sum total of the PPP's legislative agenda in the first year. This after they had crowed about what they are going to do as soon as they come in relation to the petroleum industry. But you sense a hands off the petroleum sector. And you don't know whether it's part of the price that is being paid for the intervention that took place in the last elections. But there seemed to be no urgency to bring on board legislation or updating existing legislation, be it the EPA standards, the Petroleum Commission, right? There seemed to be no urgency to do this. And what has amazed me when I look at these things is that all those who had something to say last year, prominent citizens, they've mostly disappeared. And you have to come to the conclusion that this wasn't about the politics or about the elections and so on. This was about something that says people that look like me and you not supposed to be governing this country.
This country, yes.
And
with that,
irony, because here we were, our foreparents come here as slaves. We didn't get any reparations or recompense, whether in land or monies and so on. We welcome all who came. They didn't have to go through the struggles that we went through. They had struggles, but they didn't go through the struggles that we went through for all those back-breaking years. And yet today's modern Guyana, you have the feeling that as a black person, as an African, you are trespassing in Guyana. And you can't look forward. You cannot look forward to leadership and governance in the economy. And what people don't know, you see I call out those numbers in GDP and so on down there. Flattering as they seem, they were achieved despite great challenges, great resistance from certain elements in the private sector who control the private sector. They don't know what we went through in trying to manage this economy. And the unfortunate thing is the skewness of the wealth is as such that when African dominated government or African led government is in place, it is on knife edge or eggshells as it relates to the economy and the management of the economy.
And the way in which the private sector was be able to undermine during those 5 years.
Exactly.
Undermine the economy, holding back on spending and all of that stuff. I'll have to get you back to talk about some of those experiences in the 5 years. As you say, there's more in the Martin and the pistol. Vincent, is there anything that I didn't touch on that you really want to say before we go?
No. Not. Matter of fact, I'm doing another program tomorrow, and of course comes on Thursday. And what might be missed today, your audience, I know the faithful audience, I know they will follow those. So what might be missed today, we can pick up in some of those other programs, and certainly we can continue this discussion in other areas as time go by. But one thing is for sure, that it is difficult to see how we're going to come out of this pandemic that we have if we continue to have these sporadic interventions rather than planned programs and policies that have an aim and that have targeted outcomes. When you look at, for example, if they were to open school, are we opening school in September? Up to now, this is half of August gone. Yet we don't know where the schools are going to be open. If schools are going to be open, where the people are going to get the money from to buy school clothes and so on? The 19,000 We Care grant, that has gone already in food. It's gone already in food. How are we going to send school children when the buses that the David G buses have gone? So people now have to find transportation to send the children to school. How are they going to send it? How are they going to prepare a lunch kit with the prices of food that they have right now? Are we really prepared for school opening in September? So there are a number of other issues that we can look at and talk and touch on, and hopefully they're listening and they're getting free advice. Ordinarily they'll have to bring in consultants and pay high prices, but as you said, we just can't talk. So
and lending your expertise and your institutional knowledge and your overall knowledge of the economy. I think you've done us a good turn, and we can tell from the responses from the audience. Okay, thank you much, brother.
Thank you, David.
And there you have it, another edition of Politics 101. Thanking you all for keeping the faith and staying in there with us. As I said, this program is lending its name to the protest movement, the resistance movement, the movement against dictatorship. It has begun. We are doing our small part, which we hope will get bigger on the East Coast. We have been to Buxton, we've been to Victoria, we're going to go to other areas, and we're going to try to mobilize people to come out and speak. We're already seeing results of these protests. Hopefully, the other political parties are going to join the movement. We in the WPA, our resources are small, but we are using whatever small resources we have to join with individuals and other organizations to bring our people out. On Sunday, we had a visit to the protest from Adriana Thomas, you just saw her there, from former Minister Annette Ferguson was there. I got a chance to have a long discussion with her as we talk about how we are going to continue to hold this government accountable. Never again in this country must we have government, whether it's their government or our government, and we are not out there making demands. We've got to make demands. I'm saying we've got to make concrete demands. We're out there, we must say what we want. Teachers must come out and say what they want. We must keep them busy. They must not be able to sleep easily at nights, knowing that our people are out there. Those of us who call ourselves leaders must not only come to you when we need your votes. In times like these, when you're under pressure, we've got to stand with you and keep standing with you. And I, as an individual, intend to do that. The party to which I belong, the Working People's Alliance, intends to do that. This program, other program, Buxtonian Morning Time, we are committed to standing with you in making demands for you to survive this onslaught, economic onslaught, the onslaught of the pandemic, government I hand in it, mandates. We're going to stand with you and make sure. And then we're going to try to get immediate results for you. So stay with us, and we're going to stay with you in building this movement against dictatorship, this movement against this dictatorship, people's movement against dictatorship. That's what we're building. And we must not be fearful. Let not fear take you over, because that's what they want. A few black people would jump up for 2 mornings, but then they will get fearful once they come down on you. So there you have it. Politics 101, another program on Thursday. I think that we are going to talk about what happened on the weekend. We're going to try to get some of the leaders of the protests in New York. Rickford Burke and the other fellas out there, we're going to try to get them, and some of the leaders of the protests in Buxton. And we're going to talk about what those activities achieved and how we're going to plan for similar protests going forward. So we're going to try for that program on Thursday. And so we come here in peace, we leave in peace. And remember, help us to stay alive, or help these programs to stay alive, because I think they are playing an important role. God bless Hakeem Jeffries. God bless the other Congress people that have come out, and let their voices be heard. Thank you so much, and good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.